much, and really a pleasure to be here today, but not in person. I just realized that I actually miss our live our evening meetings at BCS that we used to attend or even sometimes present at, which feels like ages ago. In pre-pandemic time, so time really flies. Very pleased to be here. And yes, that's correct. I'm still working on ITIL, and if you don't like something in ITIL, that's probably my fault. If you do like something in ITIL, then there is a long list of contributors at the end of every publication. We will be talking of challenges of digital enterprise today. And I have basically four topics to address. It's not an exhaustive list, of course, but this is something that either persistently appears on the list of challenges of our modern businesses and modern digital IT teams, or something that recently really struck me as relevant and important, and something that I'm very happy to share today, because I hope you will also find it interesting and important. There will be two polls, two links to Microsoft Forms in the course of the presentation today. I will appreciate if you take a minute each time to fill them in. One will have 5 questions, the other one just 1, so they won't take much time. And we will be looking at this and discussing the results of those polls straight away. So it's not something that I am just going to take away with me and analyze somewhere in a basement like we ITIL people do. I will immediately share, and we will see whether it's interesting or not. I will start with bullet 1, unsurprisingly, which is rethinking work. Rethinking work is a title of a book that was published last month, 4th of February, I think, was the release date, and it's written by a gentleman called Rishad Tubakawala. I happened to attend his presentation last August in San Francisco when he was presenting largely about his other book, and I was quite impressed. So I was looking forward to this new book to be published and read it straight away, and I think it's very relevant to our today's topic. So in this book, which I'm not paid for promoting, but sincerely recommend, Rishad describes 5 factors that, in his opinion, are going to change or are already changing the way we all work. And these 5 factors, I believe, are especially and most strongly affecting organizations which are significantly depend on digital technologies, which is pretty much every organization in the world these days, and digital organizations delivering products and services based on those technologies. So the 5 factors that Rishad describes include generational shifts. It's not only about generation XYZ appearing with new values or new motives or different attention span, as we like discussing. It's actually the fact that we have 4 or 5 generations working together. And those generational shifts also include other demographic effects, demographic factors. For instance, well, it's quite obvious then in Europe and in North America, the population is aging, and people who would, in other circumstances, probably would be replaced by younger generations stay longer in work, and they possess the competences, they possess the experience that cannot be fully substituted by competences and experience of people who are coming in. So there are related tasks of attracting younger people, retaining the older or more experienced people, motivating some group of employees to come on board and stay, motivating other groups of employees to stay and continue working for the company. And this is one thing, the generational picture, the demographic picture. Another thing is obviously the technology development, something that we, being people focused on technology, would probably start with and end with the challenge discussion. And generally, we would just say that this is an AI-focused presentation, but not only. However, AI cannot be dismissed. And one important effect that the author, in this case, emphasizes is that AI reduces the cost of knowledge. Knowledge is not as much as a power as it used to be, and the cost, the price, the value of knowledge will be decreasing because the cost of obtaining knowledge will be decreasing. Something that used to be proprietary, something that required a lot of experience, something that required special skills can be now obtained like this, just by a few clicks and a clever prompt. And this is something that is changing the balance of power, and younger, less experienced companies, younger, less experienced teams may be as capable of delivering great results as more experienced and let's say more skilled originally teams. Another important factor there is the marketplaces development, and this is not only about the marketplaces such as I don't know, Airbnb or any, I don't know, Etsy or anything where you just sell stuff, whatever that stuff is. It's marketplaces that enable organizations to source workforce, to source people, to source talents from pretty much anywhere in the world. And when I say from anywhere, it means that both the employer and the employee can be located anywhere. So it's a more flexible, more dynamic access to talents, which can be a competitive advantage, or can be actually not, can be a disadvantage that can trigger some important people to leave organizations and to start some sort of freelancing career. This development of workforce marketplaces have introduced a challenge for many organizations of losing talents that prefer benefiting from the gig economy, having multiple tasks or multiple projects at the same time, being more flexible in their work. And when discussing this topic, Tishad introduces a new term, which he, as far as I understand, made up, fractionalized employees. One recommendation that he has there, and maybe it will be relevant for your team, so I will share it because I found it relevant and impressive, was that some organizations decide to keep the loyalty and significant part of time of their most valued and most expensive, experienced employees by offering them part-time employment with full-time benefits. So if I'm staying on board of a business, but only for 2 or 3 days a week, let's say, and proportionally decreased salary, but retain the 100% of the benefit package, that it keeps the loyalty in, it keeps my interest and kind of investment in the company, but it also offers me as a seasoned professional an opportunity to either just relax for the rest 2 or 3 days a week, or go on to some sort of consultancy or some other gig type work. And I know, working in this field, many people who would actually like this format, and I know companies that are struggling to keep seasoned, experienced professionals in because they cannot offer them interesting enough job or cannot afford having them full time. So that's a side effect of those marketplaces, and that may introduce these new ways of working. Consider that. Of course, when we say new ways of working, we cannot dismiss the extended effect of the COVID lockdown. And it's not limited to the BCS meetings being mostly online rather than live, but it also, of course, involves all that hybrid work and work from home formats. And to be honest, I don't know how much I am supposed to be paid in order to come back to the office and to daily commute. Hybrid, okay. Work from home, okay, for my type of work, but going to central London how the way I used to before lockdown, and in my opinion, wasting hours a day on that commute is something that I will probably never agree for. So apart from that obvious impact of some businesses going online, new operating models, new business models go based on online work. And apart from people working from home or remotely or from somewhere else on the planet, part of the long-term impact of COVID is also that many people actually reviewed their perception of the importance of value of work. Many people decided, okay, so everything can be over in just months or days. Or I actually enjoy being at home with family more than going to office every day. Or there are other formats of work, regardless of what actually their motives are in each particular case. People can change, or many people have changed this perception of the work-life balance and work-life value. And that affects people's readiness to work in old formats, people's readiness to return to the office, people's readiness to work on something they don't see a purpose in. So it's motivational challenge, it's a value challenge. So it's just an intro, of course. I'm not going to walk you through the whole content of the book. But when I was reading it, it really resonated. I think that for many organizations, it's this set of challenges is very relevant. And I think that the role of technology in this set is actually very high. So whether we are working in a technology team or just in a business which is highly technology dependent, I think this is something for us to consider. One thing that I wanted to add before we move to the next slide on this is that Richard mentioned this, but and I totally agree with his assessment. Businesses are trying to come back to the way they used to work before pandemic or some other before state. Many organizations are trying to return to what they perceive as a status quo, without any considerations for the fact that actually that status quo is the past and we cannot return to that. We have a new status quo which is very different in all these aspects. Different people, different motivation, different technology opportunities and technology threats, different economy. Basically, in all areas of the PESTEL, political economy, social, technology, and legal and environmental, in all these factors, things have changed quite dramatically. And we need to orient, we need to assess the situation. Remember this word orient. We will come to that in 2 slides. But before we go there, I wanted to ask you to confirm or deny the relevance of these shifts. So if you don't mind, I will put in the chart. In just a moment, I will pick it up from elsewhere. I will put in the chart this link. Or you can use the QR code if you are watching it on a screen different from your favorite device. If you are watching it on a computer, then probably link in the chat will be more convenient for you. And there are just 5 questions, 1 per challenge, 1 per factor. Let's have a look whether they are relevant for you or not. Whether they are relevant for your organization or not. And I will immediately share.
Roman, I can't actually see the link in the chat, but I have been successfully able to.
That is because I sent it to just one person on the call rather than to everyone. So it's not surprising. Thank you. That should work now.
Lovely, that's great, thanks.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for putting it out. But you know, maybe all this is rubbish, and all these factors only exist in Richard's and mine imagination. So let's have a look.
I think the challenge in the questionnaire is actually its opportunities and difficulties a lot of the time.
So yes, some responses are coming in. We have how many? Dozen participants. So I will wait for, let's say, 10 responses to come in, assuming that everyone who is in the meeting is actually listening. And then I will share. Seven. I will wait till 10 responses, and or till, let's say, 3 minutes, whichever happens first.
How do we know that our response has been received? I mean, my phone says it has, but
I do see 7 responses so far.
okay. Is it one from me, David Norfolk?
I don't know, because it's an anonymous poll, but if you
Okay,
submitted it, then it certainly is there.
Okay, no problem.
But hopefully, if you've got the response notification on your
Then
device when you submitted,
nowhere else for it to go.
we all
Okay.
have to trust Microsoft.
You still trust computers? After
Not only
ITSM.
computers, also Microsoft. Okay, let's have a look. If we have more, then probably there will be some changes, but unlikely they will be changing the overall picture. So we have the first one about the generational demographic shifts, attracting young generations, keeping the expertise, motivating people with different value sets, let's say, or different guiding values. And we have 5 out of 7, so not very statistically valid, but nevertheless, it's certainly a majority thinking that we experience the shifts and they create opportunities rather than difficulties. So quite optimistic there, and it's important, and it's a source of opportunities. The one with AI, we have cautious optimism here, because being again people who are technology focused in terms of our career, we don't expect, at least no one of those who voted expect difficulties from AI affecting organization. 4 people said more opportunities than difficulties, and 3 people said it's hard to say, too early to say, maybe may go either way. The marketplace part also is perceived quite optimistically. Expansion of marketplaces is affecting our organization and create more opportunities. And what do we have in the gig economy? 57 says we often involve part-time and ad hoc contributors, so our organization actually benefits from the gig economy. And 43% said we suffer from gig economy. We have lost important full-time. No one said that. We notice gig economy, but it doesn't affect our organization. It may be, I'm just guessing, for instance, because of working in public sector, working in government organizations, we don't have a full access to the benefits of gig economy. Working in more commercial organization, we usually are more flexible in involving people like that. And finally, the most diverse part with COVID. We have significantly changed our business model because of COVID, 2 out of 7. Or at this point, 2 out of, yes, still 7. That's because it was, you could have chosen multiple, yes. We have significantly changed our operating models. Our office workers have moved to a hybrid home-based format for most of us. Reviewed the role of work in their lives noticed by 1 of the 7, and something else that happened because of COVID with, again, 1 person out of 7. As a very brief, let's say, conclusion from this, these are important factors. We perceive them positively. But before we agree that they are mostly positive and they are sources of opportunities, not only challenges, I just want to notice that we see organizations that, for instance, force people to come back to the offices, or we see organizations that impose very strict constraints on involving external talents, or we see organizations that disregard the generational differences and just apply blanket policies to everyone in the organization and expect them to react in the same way, or just don't apply any policies because we don't manage our people, or we don't care of how they are motivated, what their values are. And I know organizations that are trying to work and to manage themselves in, let's say, 80s, 90s manner in the middle of 2020s, and it's unlikely to be a productive approach. It's unlikely to be particularly effective. And if you are working in a competitive industry and you expect people to be your competitive advantage, then these 5 factors is something to consider. If you think it may be relevant for you, I do recommend the book. This year, it's probably the most insightful and thought-provoking thing I've read, and I read quite a lot. And it's only the beginning of the year, so maybe it will be moved down in this ranking, but I wanted to share this because I believe it may be useful. Completely different point that is around for years, and I believe many of you are familiar with it, but in case you are not, something that I really want to emphasize as the challenge of today's business, any business, and of working in digital technology area specifically. And this is the increasing complexity. I will refer to probably the most well-known model in this area. It's called Canevin. I believe you are familiar with this. If you are not, Canevin, cynefin.io is, I will put the link in the chat if, again, QR code is not the most convenient way for you. If you are not familiar, that's the link to the wiki knowledge base on Canevin run by people working with Dave Snowden, who is the father of the framework. I don't want to bore you for too long because I expect that many of you are familiar with it or at least have seen it. But I want to emphasize that dealing with complexity is probably one of the most most important new competencies that became critical in the last couple of decades. And it's not only personal competency that we have to develop in this sense, but it's also an organizational ability to deal with situations of different complexity. So just a very brief intro for those who are not familiar. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we understand the cause and effect relationship. We know why things are happening. And we can apply these heuristics of sense, categorize, respond. In the context familiar to people working in service management, think of request fulfillment or dealing with a well-known incident which happened to a well-known system. It's another question why it's still happening, but we know how to deal with this. We have a solution somewhere in knowledge base. So we sense, or in this case, detect the incident. We categorize it according to some rules of categorization based on some clearly known and proven criteria, and then we respond in a well-known way. And we have very good chances to succeed by doing this. However, keeping in the or staying in this incident example or in this incident situation, sometimes we don't have a known solution, and we have to apply analytical skills, and we have to escalate it to people who understand the subject matter. So using again the incident situation, it's a complicated domain, so we can sense, we can analyze, and then respond based on the outcomes of the analysis. In this case, we don't have fixed constraints such as procedures, but we have governing constraints such as policies and high-level processes, and we apply good practices rather than best well-known practices, and we can do it by just applying our analytical skills. We don't know the causes or the specific situation, but we can investigate it. It's knownable, unknown. Sometimes we have, staying still in the incident management scenario, we have incidents which we fail to resolve using the sense, analyze, respond heuristics. In this situation, for instance, we may find incidents somewhere on the overlap of different technology domains. And instead of pinging and ponging it between the specialist teams, we may find ourselves swarming a team with different, swarming a swarm with different variation of competences, with different experiences, and working together in order to test different hypotheses, to probe, sense, and respond. It's a safe-to-fail experimentation domain, where we test hypotheses and find the best solution by probing. In this case, even a strict, not totally strict procedures are not working, but even generally defined processes are not working well. And this is where we need enabling constraints. Example of enabling constraints is guiding principles, for instance, or high-level policies. We work within certain constraints that help us to stay moving to keep moving in the right direction, but they do not define the how of our work. And sometimes think of, for instance, a disaster situation. We find ourselves in a chaotic domain where we don't have even the luxury of time or resources for this probing, for safe-to-fail experimentation. We need to act, and if we survive, we sense and respond. Imagine yourself, I don't know, in the jungle meeting a tiger. So you cannot test different ways of avoiding a close encounter with tiger by either climbing a tree or getting underwater or pretending to be dead or pretending to fight the tiger. You just choose one, and if that one works, then you will have a chance to share your experience with other people. If it doesn't work, we will never find out. In the middle, basically, this model doesn't have 4 domains. It actually has 5. We have this confusing or confused situation, operatic or confused, where we don't know where we are. And one way of dealing with this is to split the situation in smaller scenarios and try to allocate them to one of the 4 domains. Very important thing about complexity, because we keep hearing about complexity, we keep hearing about VUCA, everything is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The general narrative around this is that things are getting more complex. It's true, but in fact, not everything is complex or complicated in these terms. The actual skill that we have to develop for this as individuals and as organization is to be able to orient and understand where we are right now. Whether it's good time to apply the well-known solution, to analyze, to probe, and experiment, or to run, in metaphorically or literally. So our important skill related to complexity is not only to be good at each of these heuristics and at applying each of these types of constraints, but to be good at orientation in terms of where we are right now. And again, we've seen organizations, and you probably have seen organizations which are struggling to change the approach depending on this complexity. I've seen service desks which keep trying to apply what doesn't work because they work according to the procedures. And this is what, being an ITIL person, I have to mention that, what ITIL is often accused of, saying that ITIL is about setting processes and procedures, defining rules for every exception. It's just not possible. And it used to be like that because we were trying to define set of policies, procedures, processes for situations, trying to put everything in boxes in a much simpler world, in much clearer world, with significantly less of complexity. So today, instead of doing this, we need to be able to flexibly switch between procedures, processes, policies, and let's say emergency instincts. That's what I wanted to say about complexity. I don't have any polls about complexity, but happy to discuss it in following your comments in chat. I see that they are being added there, and we will have a chance to talk about it. But before we go there, another factor, another bullet on the list that I started with. And this is a completely different story, but I think it reflects some significant changes in the industry we work in. And this is about digital products and data services, or maybe digital services, or maybe IT products, I'm not sure. And let's make sure that we know what we are talking of. I will put a question, a link to this form in the chat. And Kylie, please speak up while we are. Now I think I sent it to everyone.
That's right, thank you.
Yeah, Kylie, you have your hand raised, please.
Yes, I actually, it was some definitions. I wanted a definition between complex and complicated, but I did some Googling.
Yeah,
so
I think you addressed it in the chat already. Yes.
Yeah, and David had a question about the definition of exaptive, which again I did some Googling. So
yes, the problem or let's say the complication with Canevin is that Dave Snowden, who keeps developing the framework. First, they keep changing the names with every version of this diagram slightly, but every time there are words that people have to go to some sort of dictionary for. For me, having English as the second language, it's always a challenge, like really operatic, really something that really expands my vocabulary. So that's a complication. And even the word Canevin, it's a Welsh word, and again, Dave likes using Welsh words and other not so obvious terms. Despite that complexity or complication, It's a really useful framework, so highly recommend it. If it's first time you came across it, Google it or use that wiki that I sent or shared a link to. It's really eye-opening, and it's really practically useful, despite apparent, let's say, academic flavor. It's practical. Meanwhile, let me have a look at our Microsoft Forms. Probably not this one. Let's have a look at the other one. A second, I'll just make sure that we are looking at the right screen. So my question was, what do you manage? And I have 4 responses, and it's just one. Now 5 responses and growing. Just one question. And as I hope your responses keep coming up, I just wanted to set the context for the next topic that I would like to raise before we move on. Digital products, IT services. What do we manage as a technology organization? Unfortunately, we have seen, let's say, certain developments in the market, which maybe are not always very useful in terms of collaboration and in terms of creating business value or customer value or any sort of value. So let me show you what I mean, and then we will come back to this and see whether there are any other options, or maybe that I should have added here. So looking at our history, back in, let's say, at the time when IT used to be called ICT, so 80s-ish, we had people who were mostly focused on operating IT systems, and they were thinking in terms of IT resources, and these resources were aggregated in systems or integrated in systems. And this was largely operationally focused activities. It was quite fragmented in terms of business IT connection and system landscape. And we were improving the systems reactively based on detected errors. Meanwhile, some other guys were working on creating these systems. This was project or organized work, so focused on delivering some project outputs. It was still rather fragmented because people were working in temporary organizations and working on specific systems. And significant improvement to delivered systems would probably be subject to another project. So ongoing improvement was very limited. They were also creating systems from IT resources. In this sense, the language was very similar. I understand that I'm oversimplifying, but please correct me in the chat or in the discussion later if I'm wrong. But that's how it looked, let's say, 35 years ago. And then, based on that more or less common understanding of this taxonomy, systems made of resources, 2 parallel developments happened. People who were mostly focused on operations and evolved into service management, they agreed more or less that IT resources are used to build IT systems, which can be also called products, but not often called products. And these systems are the foundation for providing IT services. And this development of service management included focusing on value creation. And since it's service relationship and value co-creation, at least in the latest versions, like ITIL 4, it's an approach that is trying to be holistic in terms of business IT and in terms of the technology landscape. And continual improvement based on feedback is integrated in the approach. So we keep listening to feedback from our users, we keep measuring the operational performance of our systems, and we keep initiating and hopefully implementing continual improvement based on that. Meanwhile, people who were mostly focused on development, they moved from working in projects to continual product management, product development and management. They claim that they focus on value delivery, implying sometimes, quite often, that when a product is deployed, the value is delivered. I wish it was the case. And it would make life for many of us much easier. As soon as something is on the shelf, the value is considered delivered, regardless of whether somebody is buying and using it from the shelf. And they also try to think and work holistically in terms of business-IT relationship and in terms of product landscape, and also use continual improvement based on the feedback. However, in terms of taxonomy, they may agree that IT resources are used to build IT systems, and those IT systems are integrated in digital products. They avoid using the word services quite often. So what we have two parallel developments that created that have led to creation of two bubbles. Let's say the digital product community and IT or digital service community. And that created this bubble mentality, and this created this island or silo mentality between digital product people who deliver value to business and IT service people who manage infrastructure. The sexy business-oriented value delivering people and the boring old school people who manage networks, which is wrong in terms of the value for business, and which is wrong in terms of the product architecture as well, and relationship of product service as well. And just as an illustration, on this slide, we have the ITIL guiding principles, which are largely followed by people who call themselves service managers, and product management principles. There is no single authoritative source, but I compiled it from various sources and then did the same exercise with the MITI and kind of aggregated the most popular, most repeating factors there: consumer focus, agility, adaptability, continuous value delivery. And I'm not doing it on the slide, but I can easily link every point on the left side with respective points on the right side and vice versa. Basically, they are very close. They are almost the same. We don't have a particular principle in ITIL for cross-functional teams, but we do have the principle of collaborate and promote visibility. So we have some assumptions. We, meaning ITIL development team, we have some assumptions in this situation. First, in our taxonomy, we think that digital services are always based on digital products. And digital products always enable value through digital services. So you cannot, there is no intrinsic value in digital products. The value is only realized when somebody is using these products, and when they use them, then they do it through consuming respective digital services. So this very taxonomy product service, it actually refers to the potential value in the IT system and the actual value experienced through the cooperation of the service provider and the service consumer. Many common problems of product and service management are caused by isolation of these two islands, of these two disciplines, and silo mentality of the professional communities. People generally don't talk. And it would be beneficial to manage digital products and services in a common context of the digital product and service lifecycle. So during 2024, we have been experimenting with this kind of shared lifecycle of digital product and service, and we were sharing it at various events, but not very openly, and we don't have any publications on this yet. So it's a work in progress, but it's kind of a working prototype of something that may address these challenges. So we think of life cycle as stages or states of what is perceived or managed as a digital product on the left-hand side of this diamond shreddy, and as a service on the right-hand side of the diamond shreddy. We think of the same words as the names of activities in product and service value chain that can be adopted by organization. But when it comes to our activities, it's not a flow, it's not a sequence, it's kind of stepping stones, and the route through these stepping stones may actually depend on the context. Bear with me for that. So 8 activities are described here. Discovery, where we decide what we actually want to do. Design, where we transform those perceived needs and opportunities into prototypes and specifications. Acquire, where we acquire or allocate resources required to build that product. Build, which can be software development or can be just integration, depending on what we treat as resources. Transition with implementation of that solution into live environment. Important separation that we didn't have before, operate as operating the product in terms of maintenance and running it, but not delivering anything, not offering but not providing. And deliver as customer-oriented SLA-triggered activity. Support, which we use if deliver or operate goes wrong and we need to restore either normal operation or normal delivery or both. In terms of the state of an instance of a digital solution, it's a cycle, but in terms of activities, they all are performed simultaneously, iteratively, and multiple versions of solutions exist. So actually, the same product can be in different states at the same time when it comes to different releases or different versions. It's a bit counterintuitively because it's counterclockwise, but we believe it's important to keep this left-right relationship creating on the left and delivering on the right, because if you imagine another organization represented as a similar diamond ready, then what we deliver will be acquired for them. So we can put 2 organizations like this. I don't have time, and it can be, we don't have time, and it can be actually a topic for a longer and a specific discussion. But the main idea here, why I put it in today's presentation, is that we have the challenge of the shifting focus of the management of managed object. If I come back to our results here, some organizations refer to what they manage as digital products, some digital service, some IT services, some IT products, some solutions, some IT solutions. You see that there is a very, very diverse and very kind of dispersed response to this, even if we have only 5. So we have kind of a mixed terminology. And at the same time, I believe you will agree, we have this siloed mentality and siloed organizations. So we think it would be good to learn to work on, to start working closer together. People who are working on the product and development side, and people who are working on the service and operation side. And it can be perceived as dev and ops, but in fact, we have product management, which is now more than just dev, and service management, which is more than just ops, and the question of who is responsible for enabling value for customers, for enabling value for the business, and both parties claim that they do. I will just indicate this and the direction we are thinking in, because again, it's a rabbit hole that I really enjoy exploring, but it's not the topic of our today's conversation. However, I want to highlight one more thing that is the last list on the bullet list, and then we can open the discussion. Assumptions based on that diamond ready. We have organizations with different purpose. The purposes of organization define the operating models, and the operating models of digital organizations are linked to their organization's responsibility for the digital product and service lifecycle. Not every organization takes responsibility for all 8 activities and all states of that diagram. Some organizations choose to focus on development only. Some organizations work as managed service providers operating other people's stuff. Some organizations repair other people's stuff. Some organizations help to integrate. I will show you, skipping a couple of slides, just a couple of patterns here. So for instance, we have a digital vendor which only does or focuses on design, build, and transition. And what is called obtain here was called acquire in that model. It's slightly different version. And we have a very traditional operation-focused service provider somewhere. They don't do design, they don't do build, they don't do transition in the delivery form of it, but they do transition in the integration, in the accepting form of transition. And when these two organizations meet, they may have a project integrating that solution that were developed by digital product vendor and will be now integrated by a digital service provider. And this central heart of the two yellow diamonds and one red, acquire or obtain in the middle, it can be actually an implementation project or integration project, which can be run by these two organizations together or by these two organizations and an integrator helping them to do it. So there are combinations of activities that can be adopted by different organizations as their operating models, as their key sets of activities. Eventually, we will have full cycle, but not necessarily managed by one of them, by one organization. And if we select only some of them, then they become the foundation for our core value streams. So another term that we introduced back in 2019 in the service management context, and everyone is talking about it, but no one is actually doing it, or at least well enough or seriously enough, is thinking in terms of value streams. And there are two main forms of value streams that are generally discussed, and one of them is development stream, from ideas to deployment. Another one is the full our business supporting value stream. You will find it in these two slides. That's one example. That's another example. I will leave it with the presentation, with the deck for you, just to not go into another rabbit hole now. But the idea here is that actually our value streams can be defined by the activities that we include in our operating model from that set of 8. And those activities, or what we select to include in our operating model, are defined by our adopted organizational purpose. We will be writing and publishing some papers on this topic. It's something that we are working on and experimenting with, and I wanted to share it with you because I believe it is an attempt to address this persistent challenge of enabling value for our business, for our customers, for other stakeholders, by organizing management of digital or IT or whatever is the name of this technology today in an efficient and optimal way. And we believe that today the way to do it optimally and efficiently implies closer collaboration between people who call themselves product managers and people who call themselves service managers, whether they use IT or ICT or EDP or digital as an adjective for that products and services. I think that was all I wanted to share. It took a bit longer than planned. We had these 5 topics, and we have these sets of answers, and some of them are taken from our ongoing thinking in the ITIL development team. Your feedback is very welcomed, and questions and discussions are just starting. So I will stop sharing the screen, and I think I will have an opportunity to say thank you for letting me present all this to you in a few minutes. So let's see what questions we have. And please don't hesitate just speaking up, switching on your camera. You don't need to type everything in the chat. But since I believe there is already some discussion in the chat, I will be grateful if you just highlight something that requires a response.
Thank you very much for that, Roman. There was an awful lot to think about there, and I think there were some questions that were coming up around the first half of the discussion, and then everybody got sucked down into the rabbit hole that you showed us in the second half of the presentation, which is very, very insightful and interesting topic, and I'm sure it's a challenge for many people working in their organizations. So it's going to be interesting to see where people want to put their questions around some of the changes in organizations, around how to deal with the various different aspects from where it's clear through to where it's complex, or indeed some of the challenges around bringing together people who wear the product hat and people who insist that they are service people. So please do turn on your mics and cameras if you want to get involved in the discussion. And who would like to lead?
David, you have a camera on, and the last question in the chat is from you. So
Okay, yes.
please combine the two.
All right. My concern, this goes back to the mid-1980s, I think, is that the business of IT is delivering business outcomes. The important thing is where you draw the man-machine boundary. And as technology evolves, the man-machine boundary moves, but you need to be looking at the delivery of a business outcome, including, if possible, automation of manual processes, but some of them will never be automated, through to the complete automation, an ERP system, something like that, which is complete automation. But most of those automated systems are embedded in a system which has semi-automation and a fair bit of manual work as well. And you need to be looking at the whole, holistically, the whole system, and watching where the man-machine boundary was. And my problem 30 years ago, was that most IT people assumed that all they were doing was dealing with the computer side of the man-machine boundary, and therefore the context diagram didn't matter. Whereas I thought what they were doing was trying to embed their automation in an overall business process. Is that any help?
You know what I think has happened recently, relatively recently, if you look comparing, today and 80s. There is a new generation of businesses and teams that think that they are dealing mostly with the computer part, because what they call digital products is being offered to mass market, to businesses or individuals, offered in a form of, let's say, an app somewhere in Google Play or in App Store elsewhere, where the consumer interaction with that digital solution is limited to what in ITIL we call access to resources. There is no service sections that they do together. There is no transfer of goods, with some exceptions. So the interaction of the intended customer or consumer user, depending on whether it's B2B or B2C, and the provider of the solution are, again, limited, and quite successfully, to just providing access to through an app or a web to some computational resources, knowledge, to some digital product. And these organizations, whether it's a small startup offering you just one app as a main business of their work, or some monster like, I don't know, Google, they have reasons to think that they create a technology solution which is perfectly suited for direct consumption, and there is no need to human interaction from their side. And they succeed in that financially, so they think, okay, that's how it works. We just create products and we make them available, and then the magic happens itself.
Yes, what worries me about that is governance. How you make sure that, I remember one team that was saying that when you are testing databases, it was a real nuisance having to share databases, and it was far better just to have one database for every developer, so they can all develop their stuff without interacting with anybody else, which is fine until such time as you try to go live, have a million people accessing at the same time. So to my mind, governance is still remarkably hard, because that is where the human side of things comes in. And they normally depend these days on having somebody with the brain the size of the planet who actually does the governance in their head. And that person falls under a bus, and the business processes fall apart.
To which part those enthusiasts of digital product development might tell you that there is a lot of controls are implemented in their solution, or better, in the level of the platforms where those solutions are run.
Yeah.
And we are doing automated testing now much better than any human testers could have done. And we have the predictive and proactive and AI-enabled operations and monitoring and self-healing systems. And the impact of possible incidents is removed before users can even start feeling it, until we have some really big mess up.
Yes.
But generally, there's a lot of evidence in favor of that, saying that no, sorry, you don't. We have integrated and automated our governance. I don't agree with that position, but I see some
Yes, I can
merit
see.
there. Yeah.
I mean, the classic case example is Excel. I hate spreadsheets. I'm a database person from way back. I hate spreadsheets. Now, the answer Excel gives you these days, it was a time when spreadsheets were full of errors. I used to look after spreadsheets were bang. And it was horrible. Nobody knew how they worked. They were full of errors, highly unreliable. And now Excel has all sorts of features that let you totally tie down the various cells in the Excel spreadsheet, so there is no need to have any errors in them. However, I don't think anybody ever uses most of those features, and certainly nobody ever tests most of those features, because otherwise it would be like running a database rather than running a spreadsheet. And so we have all the assumptions that because it could be well governed, it is well governed, which is not true. And yes, I'm old. I'm sounding like, we're all going to hell in a handcart. And there's a lot of stuff you can do these days that is self-correcting. But you do have to actually test this. Another thing that worries me a lot
I think
is the dark. Okay.
yeah, and I think that issue of testing is of what's going on in the real world is going to become more and more acute as we start relying on, for a long time we've relied on automated systems to help us make some decisions, but of course with AI, that reliance on automated systems to will dramatically increase in terms of making decisions, and I think without testing the actual outcomes that are achieved against some sort of benchmark, you can't possibly determine whether or not those decisions are being made in a ethical way. But I don't know that very many people do test against a benchmark.
The good news about this, or like at least the signs of good news, we were presenting in November with James Finister at ITSMF UK event on the topic of AI and highlighting the need for governance and ethical considerations when it comes to AI. When we were presenting again with him this spring, I think end of February or beginning of March, it was already quite different. The new legislation is coming up. There, in the surveys that are conducted, the importance of governance and compliance and ethics when it comes to the use of AI, it's ranking #1 concern among many organizations. So I think that we are kind of catching up with this. I personally believe that adoption of specifically Gen AI or commoditization of Gen AI has happened kind of prematurely. We are using something that we don't understand on a daily basis, and we trust the results. But at the same time, as business is realizing that this adoption is inevitable, we cannot stop it. If we don't put it under corporate control, under organizational control, then it will be just shadow AI, because people are using it anyway. So let's make sure that we use it in a responsible way. So based on these considerations, I think we are catching up, and I think that businesses and countries and regulators are reasonably concerned with AI as a factor that requires effective governance. And then we will have situations similar to general IT governance. Not every organizations are good at it, but all organizations have necessary resources. So let's say resources, but everything is there. You can do it well if you want to, if you care. It becomes more a responsibility of a particular organization rather than the factor of, sorry, we don't have rules for that, we don't have policies, we don't have standards. You do. We do. Now it's just a matter of applying them responsibly. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Right.
Okay. But even without, on the subject of testing, even without going as far as AI systems, when you have that kind of commoditization where you've got a provider who provides a service and then another provider consumes somebody else's service to provide a service on, or a service internally, and with all of these systems, of course, the provider, whether it's a little independent who happens to run an app just for people doing exercise classes, or whether it's someone like Google, they want to develop their applications. They want to keep on pushing it so they can sell it more and more. And so they'll make changes. And the issue is that, you've got the ongoing impact that a change in the initial provider can upset what happens further down the line. And I think that people aren't always ready for what is the developments that are happening outside the scope of their organization.
And technically, I believe the answer is the use of the common platform and standards and universal APIs and let's say better technical integration on the organizational side. I would say SIAM is the answer, or like SIAM as a body of knowledge, or SIAM as just an area of management, supply management, integration management. This is about thinking and working holistically. This is about trying to manage dependencies outside of your organizational constraints. And sometimes the solution is to work closer with the adjacent organizations in the value network, if they are willing to, if they are open to it. In the other cases, for instance, if you think of cloud like AWS or any other cloud service provider, they are not particularly flexible. They are not particularly able or willing to adjust what they do to individual customers' preferences, because it's against the idea of universality of cloud. But in that case, it's standard interfaces, standard performance, so standardization or tailoring, or a combination of the two, depending on how close we work together and depending on how willing we are and able we are to adapt.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, there's a few other people who are on the call. Is there anybody who would like to raise their own question? If so, you may take put your camera on, but otherwise take your mic off and speak up, or put your hand up as you prefer. If you're feeling bashful, then you can always type a question into the comments. In the meantime, Anthony.
Hey, good. I was going to say good morning. I'm actually in Seattle, so
good morning in this case.
It's a good evening to you guys. I'm actually interested in what is actually happening in ITIL moving forward to actually accommodate a lot of these new technologies. Just to give you a quick background on me, my name is Anthony Barron. I am one of the original authors of ITIL. I wrote version 2 and was involved in version 3, and I also invented Microsoft Operation Framework for Microsoft. and so I'm still in Seattle. I'm still working in this space, and so been detached from ITIL for a few years. And I'm just curious what is actually happening moving forward. And I don't know whether it's sort of Roman or anyone else can maybe talk to this.
I can, and for a very long time, but I won't for a very long time. So the main direction I indicated already. We think that we should bring let's say, build a bridge between the product and service community. You know probably that PeopleCert has also acquired DevOps Institute some time ago. So we do have access to DevOps audience and access to service management audience and to expertise in both. And we have a very strong relationship with with Value Stream Management Consortium. And we believe that value streams can be a bridge that and the language that can bring these two groups together. We don't plan any kind of major update that I'm aware of, but the direction in terms of smaller formats like white papers, in terms of some online micro courses or events or something, has the intent of bringing these two groups closer. With hope to cross-sell from our business perspective. But I don't want to dismiss that. But obviously, first of all, with the hope to bring them closer for the value. What I would recommend, since you are there, so I will you know probably personally, given your background, David Cannon.
I know the name. I've been, as I say, I've been buried in cloud and Azure and other things. So I've been.
Oh, if you're interested, David Cannon and Adam Griffith. I will put the names in the chat, and if you are at peoplecert.org, you will get their emails. Name.surname at peoplecert.org. So Adam is works in my team. It's another ITIL architect. He's always happy to discuss. He is based on Ohio, and we'll be happy to chat if you are interested. David Cannon, who was one of the authors for ITIL 2 and 3 and 4, he is currently head of Americas in our business development team. And he is running a very good, I believe, initiative in America, in the US, which is kind of like a special interest group, similar to this one probably, or some council of people who have the same interest. I believe he will be happy to invite you and share more. So in America, David has this program of getting together the professionals who are interested in where ITIL is moving or might be moving or should be moving.
Brilliant.
So this
that's very. Sorry, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's very interesting. Just one of the thoughts that sort of we were just batting around recently was combining things like service dependency models that you could effectively construct with what AI and other platforms like ServiceNow would actually understand, and taking that and trying to come up with some sort of interesting model around that. So it's interesting how we've literally gone a few years very quiet, and suddenly it's very interesting again. And so
I think AI gives a lot of opportunities to the areas which are traditionally we all think we need to have, and we never were able to actually develop to the appropriate level because of the complexity and because of the constantly changing environment. And these things are configuration management, IT asset management, and knowledge management. All three require keeping a rather complex networks of nodes which constantly change up to date. And we fail doing it. And because we just never, we either have them at a very basic level, which is not very useful, or we cannot update them on time. So these are three areas which I believe can hugely benefit from our AI's ability to connect disparate dots and to produce insights based on those connections. And you can think of auto or semi-auto updated knowledge articles, which is already happening. You can think of auto, let's say, not just automated discovery, but auto updated configuration and asset management basis, and dynamic presentation of the results depending on the context of whatever we are doing in a, let's say, copilot mode for our support teams. So that development of technology has introduced kind of a new wave of opportunities for service management tools, I think.
It's interesting that you call out those three, actually, because I'm solidly sit in the IT asset management realm. And I think I'd not really thought about it in that perspective of AI potentially enabling us to get a grip on something which is incredibly complex. So I shall ponder that more.
But, well, I will probably oversimplify it by saying it's an inventory, but it's more than that, and it's also a matter of tracing the status of our assets, or identifying risks, or linking asset register and our configuration database where necessary, rather than duplicating. So
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunities or area of great opportunities. However, we have been running a number of surveys, and generally we are trying to monitor how AI is changing the landscape. I haven't met examples of these three areas being successfully implemented.
Yeah. So
piloting is there.
Yeah.
Configuration management is still not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think the impetus for improving config and ITAM is very much coming from regulatory requirements around resilience. And actually it's really being recognized that without config and without ITAM, you can't be resilient because you just don't know what you have. And therefore you can't know the role that it plays, and you can't understand the potential threat.
And that leads into what Anthony was saying as well. Yes, about modeling that.
Yeah. Yeah. But having said that, I think accuracy is still a major issue. It's incredibly, you can generalize, but unless you actually have accurate data, you can't really have an impact on your resilience, because of course you're looking for the needle in the haystack. So that's, I think, the challenge, particularly with generative AI, or even just looking for patterns and trying to understand what those patterns are, is that if your AI misunderstands the patterns or doesn't capture them correctly, then you still got a problem, because you don't have that level of accuracy that's required.
You're going to, can I just jump in here? You're going to want, one of the things you're going to hit is the effect of temporal on configuration management databases. In the fact is that your configuration management database is correct at a moment in time. The moment you're past that moment in time, it's wrong. And so what you actually have to do is you have to cope with the temporal aspect, and you have to cope with multiple configuration management layers of state. And those layers of state have accuracy at a particular point in time. That's where things like AI with models, configuration management databases that rely on temporal state within them will actually help them. And so that's what we're doing at the moment, is actually we're focusing on that. And so the combination of the temporal state and artificial intelligence can actually potentially do some interesting things. It can create, for example, dynamic schemas of everything that you know about your environment, but those dynamic schemas are also related to the different temporal states. This can spiral into a really complicated technical conversation, which I'm not trying not to do.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, you have to understand time.
Yeah.
If you understand time related to configuration management database, your CMDB can be wrong, but it's going to be wrong. But it's understanding how far wrong it is and then being able to cope with that. And that's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I guess if you're looking for patterns as well, you can identify when your CMDB or your AMDB is out of pattern, and so they're generally going to follow a fairly predictable process as it goes through its life cycle. So at some point when it jumps out of that process, that's when you can call that out and actually go and investigate and understand what's wrong. So maybe that's a potential way of looking at it as well, because that temporal time, it's still being governed through a life cycle. It'll be in a particular state at a particular time, and at some point it's pretty predictably going to move into a different state. You just don't know when that is actually going to happen.
Yeah,
it's interesting that I was just going to say that temporal aspect actually applies very well to the third base that you mentioned, Roman, which is the knowledge base, because with the adaptability in the changing circumstances, especially over the last 5 years, the rate of change in organizations means that even that knowledge that 20 years ago would have been, you could print it out and it would still be reliable, now that's atrophying as soon as it's written.
Yep. Yeah, and tends to get outdated before it gets printed.
Yeah.
That's exactly why this kind of dynamic update is important, and AI does it better and faster and cheaper than humans sometimes. But Kylie, you're right again, saying that, well, there is a famous joke that if generally any information system follows the principle of garbage in, garbage out, then in case of AI, it's garbage in amplified garbage out, and that's often a problem of applying AI capabilities of ITS systems to the mess we have in our bases. You cannot create a knowledge base based on the records of incidents where solution field is filled with the word solved. And now where we can follow what people have been doing, we can actually auto-generate and auto-populate to some extent these records of what has been done and whether it helped or not. But if we just look at those hundreds of thousands or millions of records that we already have in our systems, and we just ask AI to build a knowledge base based on it, it will be very questionable knowledge base. Unfortunately, yes. So again, organizations who start now have this late start benefit, because they don't need to deal with legacy systems, legacy architectures, legacy processes, legacy knowledge, etc. Organizations that have been around for decades and have to operate in an environment combining very old, in many ways, systems and something very new and sexy, they really struggle to benefit from these developments as much as they could have if we had these things in a better order, or just better compatible or discoverable, or whatever is lacking there.
But I think that's always been the challenge, is that information is not structured. We do our best to structure information in databases, but inevitably there is information out there that's absolutely critical that isn't structured. And I guess one of the big, I think the potential of AI is to help us manage that and understand that unstructured data. But the problem with Gen AI particularly is there's still the understanding is lacking. It churns out information, but it doesn't, I like the data, information, knowledge, wisdom hierarchy. It's definitely churning out information for us, but is it knowledge? And it's definitely not yet wisdom. And of course, everyone's terrified that at some point it will start edging out into knowledge and wisdom. And then, my goodness, what's going to happen then?
It looks like knowledge, works like knowledge, quacks like knowledge, and yet it's not knowledge. It's just, probabilistic collection of words.
Exactly.
Yes, but it looks like knowledge to anyone who is not involved. Yes, and that's another challenge, because as we all know, as long as you are not an expert in the field, everything that the language model will produce for you looks very legit.
Yeah.
If you are an expert in the field, you have a lot of questions to it.
Yeah.
That's how it usually happens. However, I don't think it's something that we are going to stop. and or we will be able or want to stop. And I also think that the adoption of AI is a shift of the scale similar to cloud, mobile networks, internet. So it's something that just changes the landscape quite significantly. And if you don't use this wave, it will just, at best, leave us behind, and at worst, will just break us. So we have to learn how to ride it. And that, although it was mentioned only as a second challenge in the list of 5 of one of the slides, for many people working in technology today is challenge number 1, both on the level of excitement associated with this and difficulties.
And what's interesting actually is it mirrors the shift that we've been going through over the 10 years in terms of, for instance, fake news, and the fact that our old guardrails and our old governance of what is real have just gone up in smoke over the last 10 years. And actually AI is just accelerating that as well.
And yes, yeah, and but at the same time, it's just hugely accelerated, but basically the same process that has been happening with our access to information over a few centuries.
Yes, although it's interesting. So if you go back to, say, the Georgian period, there was very, very little regulation, and it was very scandalous. You'd have these papers that came out and they'd be stuck on a post, and they'd be incredibly scandalous, and cartoons that would just be virulently lie about people. And then, of course, that became unacceptable. It became too much. And I guess, it was a very free speech society. So the people who were in power found that more and more uncomfortable. And so that's when we started putting in place, guardrails around the press, guardrails around advertising, etc. But of course, those guardrails relied very much on the physical constraints of printing, of reading, and now the fact that we're in a new digital world, and those physical constraints and the ability to actually capture what's going on and identify when somebody is lying, that's just disappearing again. So we're going back about 300 years to where we were 300 years ago in terms of a complete lack of governance around information.
I think just trying to be positive, which is not my usual state, to be honest. Think how the use of AI tools can speed up and improve fact-checking. Something that like 5 years ago you would have to spend hours just trying to fact-check someone's statement. The same process can be now done much faster, reaching out to the sources that you wouldn't have even thought of. So it's a two-sided whatever blade
right,
or
double-edged sword.
Yeah, double-edged sword. Exactly what was the idiom I was lost for. So it compensates.
I'm not sure it does. I think that if you start fact-checking today, you'll use sources like Elon Musk's diaries or President Trump's records, and you'll be fact-checking against sources that are themselves corrupted.
It's an obvious risk, but it's not about just validation, statistical validation, how many sources confirm, how many sources don't. It's about using some reliability ratings, using some traceability. So it's an interesting task. I'm not an expert on the topic, but I'm sure that people who do fact-checking benefit from AI as much as people who lie. Similarly, like hackers benefit from AI and any other technology as much as counter hackers.